welcome to Media M.D, your fortnightly Doof Network dose of media that you have somehow missed. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are back this fortnight to talk about Annihilation.
Yes, so this is a Netflix movie I prescribed to you 2 weeks ago, Ruben, so why don't you hit us with that plot summary?
Yes, so
just explain the ending, in detail and everything that it means.
So top 5 things you missed about the ending to Annihilation and what they mean. Okay, number 1. So the plot of this movie is there's kind of 2 beats. The first beat is a comet lands in near a lighthouse, and from it starts to extend this thing called the shimmer, a kind of reality warping effect that causes all kinds of weird shit to happen. Basically what it does is it seems to shuffle around over time the DNA of things that are inside its area of effect, causing things like crocodiles that are all flowery, or flowers that cross-pollinate, or people that turn into flowers, or flowers that turn into people, and things like that. Weird shit like that. Trees that turn into glass, all kinds of crazy shit. I would almost call it like an atom shuffler, basically.
Yes, I think the term one of them uses in the movie is like a refractor. Like it's basically, it's taking chunks of DNA and moving them around to see what happens. Yeah, exactly.
Well, to see what happens. Spoiler, we'll get to that later. We meet our main character, whose name is Lena. We find out that she has a husband who has been missing for a year, and then he suddenly returns. And as he returns, she and him are both abducted by this shadowy organization that we learn is kind of observing the shimmer and trying to stop it from expanding endlessly. Her husband went into it as one of the missions that did so, and didn't return, or until a year later. He was actually the only person to return. Everyone else died.
Yeah, in fact, I think there have been multiple missions and no one's ever come out before.
Yes, and they decide to send in one more mission with a group of 4 women, and Lena kind of joins the crew to try and figure out what happened and try and save her husband from dying. So they go inside, shit gets real weird, almost all of them die. Lena gets to the lighthouse, finds the source of the spooky shit, which is an alien that's trying to do something. You don't really know what. You can kind of theorize about it. And then she does some stuff and burns down the alien and saves everyone and escapes psychologically and physically unscathed. And then it's a great happy ending.
It's definitely her, and it's definitely she's as she was before she went in.
She's exactly the same. Nothing has changed about her. So obviously that's not what happens. This movie is, well, it's mostly what happens. But this movie isn't really about that. Or kind of is. That's the first layer of what is happening in this movie, right? And then it's the kind of movie that begs you to rewatch it and analyze it further. And I've got like maybe 4 different interpretations of what this movie is trying to talk about that could all kind of be the case that I was thinking about ever since I watched it.
Yeah. Because I was hesitant. I watched it again for this like a week ago, and I enjoyed this movie so much more this second time. Like, I watched it for the first time like a year and a half ago. I enjoyed it so much more this time, and I was so tempted to message you and say you should probably watch this twice. Yeah. Because I just enjoyed it so much more the second time.
Yes. I did do a second viewing, and I did a lot of like looking up of articles of. I googled what does the ending mean. And it's the worst thing to Google, because when you Google that, you always get people who have written this for the most idiotic audience, I can only assume, because they explain like all the basic things like, you might have missed her eyes change color at the end, and I'm like, no, of course I didn't miss that. Like, it's obviously important.
It's a whole like 10-second shot. It's very hard to miss. Yeah,
I guess they write it for people who are just looking at their phones the whole time. Anyway, I actually. It's interesting to me because even on my first viewing, there are things that stand out about this movie that it's trying to say, right? Or like kind of lampshades that it hangs, right? Like, well, should we get into kind of what it all means first, or should we talk about some of the technical marvel that this movie is? Because it's obviously it's got a lot of really natural looking CGI. It's got a lot of really beautiful cinematography. Like, it's a really beautifully shot and composed movie.
Oh, absolutely. And all that CGI. Like, this movie is just so colourful. Like, I was just blown away again the second time. It's just how like for a movie that is just not positive vibes for the whole thing, it's
No, it
it's
isn't,
so
is it?
colorful and just like you're always just being shown this entire rainbow of stuff on the screen as people are
Yeah.
being mauled to death and stuff.
Yeah, and there's even some parts where sometimes it's nighttime and this creepy bear attacks, and it almost just kind of broken up into this like daytime is wondrous and mystical and nighttime is dangerous and deadly. But then a few moments break that. Like there's a daytime where they start exploring this kind of military base that they've come across, and as they're exploring it, the sun starts to set. And they find something horrifying, which is a nice little bit of nighttime symbolizing the horror that they're going to encounter. And then there's this other part where one of the characters like turns into a tree, or we don't explicitly see what happens to her, but it's pretty obvious that she turns into a plant in some way. And that's in the middle of the day. That one's not at nighttime at all. And so it's interesting to me that for a lot of the movie, it has this beat of nighttime is when all the really dark, spooky shit happens. But then this daytime scene of this woman turning into a tree, which I guess isn't like played in like suspense or horror, but is just kind of existentially horrifying, breaks that rule.
I think that's interesting. I would think that's arguable. I agree. The concept of being turned into plants is kind of horrifying. But the framing of that moment is definitely, that's what that girl wants to happen at that point.
Well,
like
yes.
She kind of is like, she embraces it in the final moments, which there's a case to be made for that being said to be a beautiful moment. You know what I mean?
I guess, but she embraces it, and it's it was clear to me that she's not thinking clearly. Like her brain has been affected by being in this place, which is, I felt, one of the reasons she accepted it.
Right, but I do think one of the things this movie is questioning is like, the concept of the self, and like there is all that stuff. Like if your brain is being altered in that way, at what point does it stop being you? One of the devices that this movie brings up is they all kind of came in here to die to various degrees. So may not have required that much changing for her to want to die in this beautiful way.
Yeah, it's a dour movie, isn't it? Before we dive into the meanings of stuff, I want to talk more about some of the things I liked and disliked about this movie on the kind of first level, on the surface level, right? There's a lot of beautiful things and a lot of really nice kind of shots that start to tie into some of the meanings of things. When we first see the husband has returned, I immediately got the vibe that he was an evil twin, by the way. I don't know if you did too, because he just is so clearly like an evil twin. Like, we see flashbacks of the happy version of him, and it's so different that I was immediately like, oh, this guy's an evil twin. And then we kind of find out that maybe he is. Like, it's a little unclear, but it's possible that he is.
He's something.
He's something, exactly. And we get this shot that I really like of Lena, and her husband, Kane, holding hands, or the evil twin of Kane holding hands, and we see it through a glass of water.
Yeah.
And it's this weird, like, refracting, image of their hands kind of melded into one.
Makes
and
so much sense on the second watch as well. I loved that.
We see a few shots that are through a glass of water. We see one later of Lena after she's come back, and her hand is like mirrored, and it's from the opposite side, possibly implying that she is a clone. But possibly just implying like she's gone through an experience that significantly changed her to the point that this water is now reflecting a different side of her. But I just love that beat. I really loved, we first meet Dr. Ventress, and I was immediately like, well, okay, Dr. Ventress, really? Like, that's such a cliched evil name. And we find out that she has a bit more depth than that, but she is a bit evil. Actually, I want to talk about my major problem with this movie, and this is going to be such a shitty complaint, so just buckle in, everybody, because it really is a shitty one. Movies like this are clearly not about what is the scientific explanation for this shimmer, what's going on here. It's not about logic being used to analyze this, right? Like, that's clearly not what this movie is. But I had such a problem with the way that this mission went down, with the way that they approached this mission of, we learn nobody has ever come back from the shimmer, but they just go in, and then bad shit immediately starts happening, and their first thought isn't like, okay, let's turn around and tell everybody what's in here so that people can like know what to expect when they go in, because they don't actually have a reason not to go back at the start. I thought maybe they like, there's some things about them losing their memory and stuff, so I thought maybe they don't know how to get out or something like that, but that's kind of explicitly deconfirmed, and I'm kind of like, guys, just go out and like gather some data. Like, you've got some data points, you can do another mission, it's all right. But clearly the reason they don't do that is because the main characters, Lena and Ventress, aren't really here to gather data. They're here to, I don't know, to die, to maybe not explicitly to die, but to kind of to get to the end of this mission or die trying, I guess.
Yeah, so obviously, like, we find out Ventress has cancer, and she's been the one managing this from the outside for ages. So you're right, she's sort of at the point where she just needs to go and do it herself, because like going out for her doesn't fix her problem. She's here because she needs to know, and apparently she can only do that herself now.
Yeah. But Lena, I actually found myself actively hating as the movie went on, because she willfully manipulates and intentionally puts into danger the rest of the crew. Right.
And I like how there's very little time for us to not know this. Like, there's the moment where she's sort of like, oh, I think this is our best bet. And you're like, okay, that seems like it could be legit. And then we cut back to, one of the devices of the movie is we're constantly flickering back to her being interviewed after she's gotten out at the end.
Yeah.
And she just straight up confirms. She's like, oh, I didn't believe that. It was just the easiest way to get them to keep going in with us.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And you're just sort of like, okay, so you're just a shitbag.
You're just a monster. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is we find out that the mutations are getting more and more pronounced as we get closer to the lighthouse. And so it's just like, there's literally no reason for them to keep going in an effort to escape. It is just bullshit by Lena. And it gets all of the crew killed. And that blood is pretty explicitly, I would say, on Lena's hands.
Yeah, but she does find out the mystery and end up completing the mission, so...
Yay!
Yeah, like, because I mean, yeah, like, I don't know. I guess while we're nitpicking stuff like that, it's like, one of the whole things is they're like really worried because when they go to sleep, they clearly like lose all their memories, and that's part of the thing. They don't know how far in they are. They think they've been going for about 3 to 4 days. And I really like that as a way to just fast track to the, oh shit, we're in the middle of it moment.
Okay.
But like, just leave yourself a note before you go to sleep.
Right. There's so many things they could have done. Right. Like,
yeah.
And I, as I was watching the movie for the first time, I was thinking to myself, oh, why can't they just do this? And I was like, no, that's not the point, Ruben. Stop. Just let yourself go along with it. But I couldn't help it. Like, there were so many times.
Yeah.
I think I want to talk about one of the interpretations of this movie, because as we're talking about things, I want to be like, oh, and this could tie into this.
Sure.
Which is the idea of recovery from trauma, I think. We find out pretty explicitly that each of the crew members on this journey have had a terrible incident in their lives, or have things that are, real world traumas that people suffer, genuinely psychologically damaging experiences, right? Lena's, we're not 100% sure of Lena's, but I have a few theories on that. We find out Ventress has cancer. We find out, I can't remember the name, but the one of the other ones is like clearly suicidal, and is like recovering from suicidal ideation or depression. We find out that one of them lost a child. They lost their daughter, and they represent this as like, I didn't just lose my child, I lost myself because it was such a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
So they all clearly have very strong traumas that drive them to the edge of being suicidal in this mission, right? And I think that's one of the things that this is potentially an analogy for, is the damaging psychology behind trauma and where it can lead. It leads the girl who turns into a plant to kind of commit suicide, basically. It leads the other characters to these kind of violent ends. And Lena isn't unscathed. She is changed permanently from this. And I think that's kind of one of the interpretations of what's going on here. And then we get to things like, when they fall asleep, they lose their memories. And that's kind of analogous to like, if you're depressed, you can have these kind of side effects of memory loss, or just like sleeping for a long time is a common kind of apathetic side effect of depression. And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not an expert on this, but I can kind of see a lot of threads that link between that interpretation. So that's kind of the subsurface interpretation that I think is what this movie is talking about.
Yeah, I agree. It's not something I read into, but like I definitely see that. And like as you said, like it's impossible not to notice that it's talking about a bunch of people who, for various reasons, have decided they don't feel too much of a need to live anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I think that's probably a fair read.
Yeah.
I guess just to throw in my own, and it's probably one of the ones you're about to bring up. I really saw it as a thing talking about how I don't know. I guess it's discussing the various relationships between change and it's a movie about
Yeah.
change, I would say, and
Yes.
how death relates to change in the sense that like maybe death and death is a form of change, or I don't know, like that's a bit grim. So kind of maybe like change is an alternative to death would be a better way of framing
Mm.
it.
Or maybe change and death are one and the same to an extent.
Yeah. Like there's some overlap conceptually, and like that comes up in a number of ways. I think the best one, and maybe it's just because I studied this for a semester at uni that I honed in on it so much. But it opens the movie, the backstory opens with Natalie Portman working as a professor. She's like a molecular biologist, and
Yep.
she's giving a lecture on cancer and how cancer isn't
Oh yeah.
death innately. Like on a molecular level, cancer isn't death. Cancer is actually the proliferation and just like overabundance of life. Like what a tumor is it's your cells stopping limiting themselves from growing and to the point where they
Yeah.
grow enough to kill you. And
Yeah.
I mean obviously that kind of relates to the shimmer.
Yeah,
Right?
cancer is a big through line throughout this entire story, right?
Yeah.
Ventress has cancer. One of the scientists lost her daughter to leukemia. There are a lot of cancer parallels in here. And actually, my interpretation of the ending, or at least an interpretation of the ending here, is when Ventress was kind of broken down and turned into this alien, we see what is presumably cancer or a cancerous kind of development kind of taking over part of this alien creature, like damaging it. And yes, it is ultimately destroyed by this fire, but I kind of see this cancer or this change agent coming from Ventress into the alien ecosystem being one of the things that causes it to eventually die.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
So you're right. There's a lot of like cancer as a metaphor for change, or like like bad change, I guess, versus potentially good change.
Yeah.
In this movie, I want to pull out one other one, which is interesting, which is something that we haven't talked about because on surface level it seems very disconnected from the rest of the movie. Is Lena is having an affair, or was having an affair before her husband disappeared.
Right. Right.
With one of the other professors at her work,
Mm.
who is also married. And I found this very interesting because I kind of just accepted this on my first watch as like, oh yeah, I'm sure we'll find out more about how this relates later. And we never really do. Like, it never really plays in explicitly to the story. But watching it again, I kind of saw this and saw the way that the story ends with Lena and Kane kind of confronting each other about like, hey, are you really Kane? And he says, I don't know, are you really Lena? And she doesn't really react. Or she says yes, but it's kind of ambiguous as to whether that's true or not. I kind of saw a bit of metaphor of a couple going through an affair and the way that it changed their dynamic as being another metaphor for what the shimmer is potentially representing here. This incredible trauma that is like changing these people to the extent that they are no longer the same. And you see a kind of muted, stunted hug between them of like completely affectionless, right at the very end. They have this completely affectionless hug, which is in direct contrast to the flashbacks we see of them before he went into the shimmer, where they're like happy. They're like have a very like strong chemistry. Obviously, Natalie Portman and I'm blanking on Kane's actor's name. What's his name? He's in Star Wars and stuff. What is he?
Something Oscar Isaac?
Oscar Isaac, that's it. Like they're both great actors and they portray the chemistry between them in this flashback exceptionally well. And then it's so obvious immediately after he gets back and after she gets back, there is no chemistry there. They are completely incompatible.
Yeah. I would kind of work that into the metaphor. I guess I'm turning into a broken record. I would work that into the metaphor of change that's what I meant before.
Yeah,
like,
fair enough.
Because as well, what I would say there is the affair and the way that fits into me is Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaac's characters like got together and met and married and stuff when she was in the army, and then she
Mm.
left the army, and she moved on to becoming like a molecular biologist, and she had an
Mm.
affair with like a colleague she met there. So
Yeah.
like maybe it sort of fits into there where she'd moved into a new chapter of her life, and like that was maybe part of the cause of the infidelity or something. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
that's
making this up on the fly. I'm going to
no,
admit. So,
but that's the good thing about a movie like this is it's clearly exploring ideas around change, and we can
Yes.
take different meanings from that because it explores it and presents it through interesting enough layers that we can talk about. Okay, maybe it's talking about cancer for a bit, maybe it's talking about affairs, maybe it's talking about change explicitly, and it's kind of talking about all those things because it's portraying ideas around good and bad change and the psychological effects that has on somebody. And it's kind of deep enough that you can probe and discuss it endlessly, I would think.
Yeah, well, because it's not a movie that's trying to make a statement. It's a movie that's
No.
asking questions on very broad
Yes.
topics. And you're right, that leads like to a lot of money. Like, and we talked about this, I've said that's why I tend to prefer long form things. Like, it's why I like the Wild Boar serials, because he doesn't just make statements on a topic, he explores it from multiple different angles. And like this movie in a very short time is just asking questions about very broad topics, which leaves you with a lot to explore within it.
Yeah. And it's doing it while also presenting, on the surface, quite an engaging story about a group of researchers trying to figure out what the hell's going on with this shimmer.
Yeah. In fact, could we just quickly talk about the bear scene? Because that is so fucking good.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about the bear, which is a incredibly horrifying monster. It is a kind of mutated bear that is gigantic and like scarred and deformed and kills one of the crew members. And then comes back later, and we realize not only is it a mutated bear, it actually has the ability to mimic the voices of this crew member, either because it could just do that or because like their brain was like, DNA swapped or refracted into the bear.
Yeah, I mean, like, we have no idea why, because the mechanics of the shimmer are never really explored. But I think like I remember seeing articles when the movie was out that was sort of like, this one scene in Annihilation is like the best horror movie of the year.
Because it's just good, isn't it?
The bit where they're all tied up, and it's just the creepiness of it calling out in the dead crew member's name voice. Sorry, it's just
calling out like "help me, help!" help, basically it's in this weird like distorted voice.
And it's really like it's like a bony face as well. Like it's just it's a
and it's got
horrifying
like a second mouth, I think, or maybe its mouth is exposed, but it looked a bit like it had a second mouth as well. It was really fucked.
I love that.
Very scary, very scary scene. A great movie, an incredibly well made movie. I like technically very incredibly well implemented, executed. We actually don't get into the shimmer for about 30 minutes, I would say, and the entire thing is great. Like even just the interactions between these characters before they go into the shimmer. They have this scene where they're kind of drinking a beer, as Lena has basically just arrived here. They kind of share a beer and hang out, and it's so good. Like it's all just so well acted, so well written, so tight. Like it's great. It's a really good movie.
Yeah, I agree. The soundtrack is phenomenal. Like it's quite varied as well. There's all sorts of things going on. But like just on every level, it's so well put together.
Yeah, great. I really loved it. I wonder, and this is something that I might need to consider again in future readings, is I wonder how much of an unreliable narrator Lena is here.
As in, like, how much... Because as we said, the framing is we keep coming back to her, and it's sort of like she is recounting what happened.
Yes.
To
she's being
the
interviewed
scientists.
by Benedict Wong after the shimmer has been destroyed.
Right, exactly.
Theoretically destroyed, I guess.
And yeah, so you do... Like, I guess it's worth questioning whether she's making any of it up.
Yeah.
I mean, you think she'd do a better job of making herself not look like a shitbag?
No, exactly. That's what I was going to say. She really makes herself look bad. And so from that perspective, it's not an unreliable narrator. But there are a few moments of like things that don't quite add up. Like, okay, here's one. When she climbs down into the heart of the alien or whatever, we see Ventress, who has arrived here before her. And for one shot, Ventress has no eyes. And then Ventress turns around and has eyes. Did you notice this?
Yeah. She's real creepy looking before she turns around and notices Natalie Portman's
and then
there.
she's normal. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? Like, what? And that's unremarked on. And I couldn't think of what that was except for this alien, like, intentionally fucking with Ventress and then kind of being like, oh, maybe I should do this instead. But the alien doesn't seem to be that level of cognizant of how humans operate. So I don't know. Like, it just felt like this is weird and it doesn't quite add up, you know?
Well, we find out pretty quickly it's not all Ventress who's there when that's going on, right? Like, she's got the alien inside her at that point that kind of explodes out. So yeah, it could have just been that. Like, it's just good horror either way. Like, it creeps you out when you get down there and she's there without a face, and then she turns around and she's all, oh, it's just me. I'm normal.
Yeah, true. And there's the final confrontation, which we haven't explicitly mentioned, I guess. We basically see a clone of Lena being born and becoming more and more like her. And then there's a kind of confrontation, in air quotes. It's not quite a confrontation because the clone isn't attacking her. It's just kind of mirroring her. So Lena,
except when she tries to leave or harm it. Yeah.
Well, when she tries to leave, the clone leaves with her and presses her up against the door because she runs to the door and the clone runs to the door and they're both just kind of pressed up against the door now. So I was like, well, it's kind of stopping her leaving, but it's plausible that it's just also kind of mirroring her and that's the obstacle. It's interesting. And then, of course, as far as we know, Lena tricks it into burning itself with a grenade, flashbang, and then escapes. But we saw previously that Kane flashbanged himself, and the evil clone of Kane probably escaped, right? And so the kind of symbolism of, well, Kane killed himself, and you're saying you didn't kill yourself, you got the other clone to kill themselves, it, again, is kind of like, it doesn't quite add up, right?
Yeah, potentially.
Nothing concrete, obviously, but just a little bit weird.
No, obviously. And I mean, like, because the other side of that is, even if it is her, it's not the her that went in. Like, and I mean, that's like the one thing you come out of the ending is you're like, I don't know if it's the alien clone or if it's her, but like either way, it's arguably not
either way,
Lena anymore.
Fundamentally changed.
Yes.
I mean, not in the least that we explicitly see her eye colors changing as she hugs husband.
Yeah, well, she's got like a bit of the shimmer in her. I think that's the thing is like, it seems like the shimmer was like destroyed when the lighthouse and the alien burnt or whatever. But her and Oscar Isaac, they both have the shimmer in their eyes.
Yeah,
so it's not all gone, or at least conceptually.
Interestingly, Oscar Isaac or Kane, like, he was injured by the shimmer and he kind of recovers when it's destroyed, indicating that like it has somewhat been expunged from him to some extent, but obviously not completely. So who knows? Gotta set up Annihilation 2.
Even if it's gone, the effects of it might just be all that they're really trying to say there.
Yeah, like, exactly. That I think more strongly ties into the idea of change that's at the core of this. Yeah,
the trauma is past, but the effects still linger, kind of, to tie it back to something you said earlier. I think there is a book that this is based on. In fact, I think Scott and Matt have covered it.
Oh, really?
In one of the book clubs. And in fact, I think it might be a whole series. So there actually maybe is like an Annihilation 2 that maybe explains it in terms of the books. I don't know. I haven't read the books, so I can't say.
Me neither. I should read the books though and find out more.
Just read the Wikipedia summaries.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, can't dive into that now. I'm kind of thinking about what's in the book and will that relate or will it?
I don't know how different the book is. I mean, it could be.
And the other thing is, it does feel like, I mean, maybe the book goes into this as well, but it feels like what's potentially having been done here is a great science fiction concept has been taken and additional layers have been kind of built on top of it of like, I want to tell a story that explores questions of change, right? In a more explicit kind of exploration. And so maybe the book just doesn't have that at all. I don't know. Maybe it's more straightforward. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how they relate at all.
But yeah, I really liked this movie and I found it hard to turn off my brain during it, even though I knew I should have, which is a bit annoying. But despite that, I really did enjoy it quite a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Well, unless there's anything else.
There is one more thing. I have to give it a score, Elliot.
Well, that's where I was going with that sentence. Okay. But yep. Give it a score out of 10.
that I give it a reflected score. So the score I'm going to give it is backwards. So you have to flip, when I say the number, you have to flip it around in your brain, and that'll be the number that it actually is, okay?
Are you giving it a 6?
I'm giving it an 8.
Hey.
You flip it around, and it's
infinity.
Still the same. Oh. No, I meant flip like on the vertical axis. Anyway, yeah, I liked it. I got infinity. Yeah, infinity points.
I win recommending for this year. No, okay, yeah, I think that's fair. Like, this is just I love this movie because, as you said, it's one of those movies where when you finish it, you're asking questions to yourself. / I totally did the same thing as you and Googled Annihilation ending explained. So yeah, like I think it's just I really enjoy these movies that ask questions rather than make statements, and this one definitely asks questions more than it makes statements, I think.
Yeah, I liked it too. It's the kind of movie that is made to spark discussion, and I mean, we've been discussing it for half an hour, so obviously it's worked.
Yeah.
Cool. So what are we talking about next fortnight, Elliot?
Yes, well, we've got a special guest next fortnight. So,
I was wondering who that was.
Yeah, let me just unmute her microphone.
Welcome to the show.
Hello. Hey, thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming on. Fans of the Duff Media Network may recognize Georgia from times when her and Elliot and their other sibling Hannah go around with usually swords and bows and stuff and go on wacky adventures together. In video games, not in real life, I should point out.
Only obscure video games, though. We don't play anything anyone's ever heard of.
Yeah, only the ones that when someone says, oh, it's one of those games, but not the one that you'd first think that people would want to be playing.
Exactly.
What are you recommending to us?
So I'm going to recommend to you Clone Wars. So this is the animated Star Wars TV show that is set in the 3 years between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith.
That's episodes 2 and 3, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
cool.
Of the prequel series. I'm recommending you season 1. I mean, I recommend all 7 seasons, but we'll start with season 1.
Get hooked on the first season first.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, regular listeners to this show would know of Elliot's long-time stance of hating all things Star Wars, except for Rogue One?
I don't hate
Solo.
it.
Yeah,
I just don't think
Solo.
they're that. I don't think they're that good, except for Solo, which is very good. But yeah, no, I don't hate them.
Which is a great movie.
I just don't
obviously.
think they're as good as people make out. But yeah.
Which I think is interesting because I probably would have put myself in a similar category of being somebody who likes Star Wars since I was pretty young. But it actually wasn't until I watched Clone Wars that I'd say I became a pretty big Star Wars fan. Like, this is the show that really made me love Star Wars. Maybe it can do the same for you, Elliot.
Let's hope.
Yeah, if anything can do it. I remember I've had a pretty similar experience with I don't know if you've seen this show, Georgia, but the show Young Justice, which is like, I've always been very blasé about the DC universe of superheroes, but watching Young Justice, which is just a great show, made me actually care for the first time ever about some of these characters that were basically just jokes before that.
Because I think Elliot actually recommended Young Justice to me after you recommended it to him, and I watched it a couple of years ago, and it was very much the same. Like, was just pretty much Marvel only, and then watched that and thought, oh, this is really like these characters are great.
Interesting, yeah, totally.
Yeah,
so I can kind of see, I can see that trajectory happening again with the animated entertainment that actually gives you good characters in these universes that were kind of just jokes and memes beforehand.
Exactly, and I guess on that sort of same point, so the main figurehead behind Clone Wars is Dave Filoni. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was basically handpicked by George Lucas, who really liked his work on the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender. So that's kind of where he came from. So he worked on character and story for Avatar, and he also directed the 2 first episodes and the 2 last episodes of season 1. Plus, I would argue pretty much all the good episodes. So like the Blue Spirit, the Jet episode, and the Fortune Teller episode.
The Great Divide.
Ones he did. He did not work on season 2, so he escaped that infamous episode.
Good on him.
So that's kind of, and he also has been heavily involved in The Mandalorian. So one of the executive producers on that directed the episode with Ming-Na Wen. who I know Elliot's a fan of.
Yeah.
From Shield,
He
presumably.
did the first design for Baby Yoda, so he's basically God to me.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good
Baby
cred,
Yoda.
doesn't he? Yeah, damn.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess he comes from a background of having done Avatar: Last Airbender, which is another like animated show that has a lot of actual depth. And yeah.
Cool. Yeah, exciting. It's great to find people that have these through lines across all this different work that you love and use that as a barometer for, I'm really going to like this show as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess getting onto why I'm recommending it. I guess a little bit more background first. So there was the film, which probably a lot of people don't remember because it wasn't very good. It's a bit shit, really. There's that Clone Wars movie that came out in about 2003, maybe. I'm not sure.
I remember seeing it in the cinemas. That's about all I remember.
The fact that you remember seeing it, though, good. It passed that bar at least.
At least it was vague memory. And I rewatched that recently, and there's not much to miss. It basically all you need to take away from that. You don't need to rewatch that to watch the Clone Wars series. Basically, all you need to know is that there's a new character called Ahsoka, who is Anakin's apprentice. So he's Padawan, and there's also another sort of Force user called Ventress, Asajj Ventress, and she is Dooku's apprentice.
These are such Star Wars names already.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. And basically, if you just know that those characters exist and they're going to turn up in the first few episodes of Clone Wars, then that's all you need to know about the movie.
Cool.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, you can give that a hard miss.
So what is it that you like about the show then?
So yeah, I guess I already touched on the fact that this is the show that really made me go from somebody who just casually liked Star Wars to somebody who's a pretty big Star Wars fan. And I think the main reason is that it really expands on the whole Star Wars universe. So I know there's a lot of books that do the same thing, but I'm just not much of a reader. So we'll go to a TV show instead. So firstly, it really expands on the characters. So all the ones that you know, like particularly Anakin and Obi-Wan. And so it makes the whole kind of tragedy of Revenge of the Sith a lot sort of more meaningful and a lot more tragic to you as a viewer, as well as adding in a lot more characters. So like Ahsoka is probably, Ahsoka and Rex are probably the two big additions who basically not in any other Star Wars, and they're two of the main characters in this, and I think within the fan base have become pretty big favourites, as well as just other sort of more minor characters like Ventress and all those, and a lot of the other sort of Jedi who you vaguely see in the background in the films and just don't really ever get to know anything about. They all become like, recurring characters, and it's a show that doesn't focus on any one person in particular. It just kind of follows the war. So you get to see lots of different characters.
Yeah, I think you were... sorry, I was going to say, George, I think you were explaining that to me like on Facebook the other day, that there's like... It's divided into little like groups of episodes, like classic Doctor Who, right? Where it's like groups of a couple of episodes is sort of an arc, and then there's a bunch of those each season.
Yes, it's a mix. Like some are just one-off episodes, but they do tend to have arcs that usually go for 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 episodes that'll focus on one running plot. So when you put all those together, you essentially have like a small movie. So you get like a good mix of just, like I have to apologize. There's one episode in season 1 that does star Jar Jar Binks. It is only one episode. It's not a 3-episode arc, but I'm still so sorry for it.
Is it really that bad? Jesus Christ.
It's really bad. I mean, I guess that's part of the best thing is that you get to see all these characters, but that does occasionally involve Jar Jar Binks and C-3PO, unfortunately.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, so it's sort of a mix of just small little snippets of little things that happen, as well as like longer arcs that really expand on certain events.
They're going to keep trying to make Jar Jar Binks a cool and interesting character, huh?
They don't know.
Oh, thank
He
God.
stays
The thing is,
just
like,
as terrible
the internet
because-
already did that. We got Darth Jar Jar, and frankly, episodes 7 through 9 were too cowardly to actually go through with it.
They were.
To manifest that plot point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the internet fixed Star Wars, and Disney rejected them, and that's why the movies were bad.
The only
That's the
reason,
thesis.
yes.
So now that you are, a Star Wars fan, Georgia, what do you think is I've always been interested to hear this because the Star Wars fandom to me is always one of the ones that I've never really gotten. Like, I've never really gotten why people are so into it. And I'm curious to hear what it is you feel is the thing that makes you a Star Wars fan.
Well, like I sort of already touched on, the characterization that gets built up when you look at things in more detail, like through Clone Wars. I just really like a lot of the characters. So I think they're interesting. You have the real, like, it's just a classic sort of tragedy with the fall of Anakin. But then he has his, like, redemption at the end. And there's just something so epic about that. And then all the characters around it, the fall of the Jedi and everything. It's just so epic. Just like Lord of the Rings or something, it's just, which I'm also obviously a big fan of, and like Harry Potter, they just all kind of, just I love that epicness. I also think there's it's a very unique, like, it doesn't seem that way now because it's so like high profile, but it's such a unique world. Like, you kind of got, it's the whole space thing, but it's also a bit of a Western feel to it. But then you've got the Jedi, who are like these cool, like, samurai type sort of characters. And then especially like in Clone Wars and the prequels in general, you have like this quite complicated political situation, which I just think it's such a rich world, and all these funny looking aliens, and you've got the Outer Rim, which is like all full of criminals, and then you've got this corrupt capital in Coruscant, and I just think it's like a really rich world that's just so easy to get so many different stories out of. Like, you look at something like The Mandalorian, which is pretty grounded in season 1, and then you've got these like huge epic movies as well. So I just think you can get so much out of the world as well.
Yeah, interesting. I'm excited to, because it's kind of one of the fandoms I've never really brushed up against that much. Like, I've seen, I don't know, maybe half the Star Wars movies and shit, but I've never really gotten into the fandom because I've never really gotten into presumably any of the extended universe stuff. So I'm excited to finally give it a proper go and be like, all right, let's see what this Star Wars thing that everyone's talking about is actually all about.
Yeah, because there's definitely a level of like world building and characterization when you watch Clone Wars that you just don't fully appreciate from the films. And then when you go back and watch the films, you think, oh, wow, these are actually way better now that I know all this other stuff about the world.
it retroactively makes the movies better. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does. And that's actually why I first did watch them, because I read that online. And I thought, oh, yeah, like that sounds pretty interesting. Like, that's an interesting sell for a show, to say that like this show will make you love the prequels, because at the time I didn't love the prequels all that much. I do now. But so I thought that was sort of an interesting. Plus, obviously one of the big things with something like Star Wars is for like a film, or that they always struggled with when they wanted to make a television show, like a live action one, is budget, because you've got all these special effects. Obviously, having an animated show, there's just like no limit to what they can show. Like, so there's lots of big, like, epic space battles, sort of awesome lightsaber duels with very good action. I guess the most notable one is in the recent finale, which only aired sort of last Monday, so May the 4th, Star Wars Day. Or the episode before that, actually, I think it was the penultimate one. They had a lightsaber duel between Ahsoka and Darth Maul, who, it's a spoiler if you haven't seen Solo, but I know Elliot's the only one he's seen, but he does come back. And they have a duel, and they actually motion captured it. So the guy who, so the guy who plays Darth Maul in Phantom Menace, and a woman who was the person who did the fight scene in The Mandalorian with the armorer. So those two did a motion capture of that fight, and it's just a really good fight. It's just so well done. Like, it looks very sort of realistic. So it's very good action, and and it does actually have a finale. So it's a show that it has 3 finales. It's kind of like Futurama.
Right.
Yeah,
it's come and gone a few times.
Yeah, so it had a finish. It was always on Cartoon Network, finished there. And then they sort of finished with another sort of half season on Netflix in about, I think that was 2014. And then, just this year, Dave Filoni, with all his new power from being so awesome, managed to get permission to do one last season this year. So it only just finished the other week.
And it's confirmed, like, that's it. It's been axed.
It's done.
Yeah. Well, it finishes, the finale that just aired is like during Revenge of the Sith. So it's during the film, but just focusing on other characters like who aren't in the film, like Ahsoka and stuff. So they can't really continue it, or it won't really be in the Clone Wars. So,
it'll be something else instead. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely finished.
Interesting.
And it actually, so because I know Elliot really likes to have series that have a finish. He doesn't like things that don't end.
Well, yeah, things that go on forever and then kind of, peter out is it's sad.
But he does still watch Supernatural, so it's kind of...
but that's about
to end. Just had so many finales.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 40 for the price of one.
Yeah. No, we all know Supernatural finished at season 5.
You
can't convince me otherwise.
That's the correct state to be in. I celebrate the fact
Elliot's
that
gone too far. Yeah, he's lost to it now.
One more little thing I do need to mention. There's 2 episodes that are out of chronological order in this season. Just to be aware, I'd still just watch them in order, but episode 16 actually happens before the film. So it sort of happens before the start of the season. It's like a flashback, essentially.
Right.
And episode 22 actually is set in like the middle of season 3 for some reason. But you won't have watched beyond season 1. So that's the last episode of the season. Actually, sort of strange. Cram a lot in between that second last episode and that last episode. They cram in a season and a half. So just a forewarning.
Okay. That's bizarre. I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, I look forward to talking about that in a fortnight once we've seen it.
If you do end up watching more of the season, or the series, definitely look up the chronological order, because for the first 3 seasons, there's a couple of jump arounds, which I didn't realize until I was watching it, and I'm thinking, I was in season 3 and I'm like, this guy died. Like, I'm sure he died. Then I looked it up and he was dead, but I was watching it out of order. But
presumably you're watching it in the order they aired, but they just have weird chronology for some reason.
Yeah. And it's only the first 3 seasons for some reason. I think probably they just came up with some other stories they wanted to tell, and just for whatever reason, like it didn't fit in. So they had to have sort of ones that were set elsewhere.
How funny.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll definitely have to talk about that in a fortnight.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I'm pretty excited to dive into it. Like, I'm excited to finally get my hands around the Star Wars fandom.
Yeah.
Good. Yes, I'm excited for you to hopefully enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back to talk about at least season 1 in a fortnight. All right. Well, that's the end of our episode. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks, Georgia, and thanks everybody, audience, for joining us. If you enjoyed this show and you want to leave your thoughts for us on Clone Wars or on Annihilation or just on the show in general, you can contact us to leave your comments. Go to Media MD at Gmail. MediaMDpodcast@gmail.com. Email us at that and it'll get to us, I think.
Yes. We're also on Twitter at Media MD Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Admittedly, since we're back in the Pactverse, that Twitter is mostly just live read stuff now, but there's other announcements there too.
Back in the Pactverse? What does that mean, Elliot?
Yes. Wobbo has re-entered the Pactverse, and we are hot on his tail this time. We're going to catch him. Not 5 years behind again. Yes. So, as Wobbo wrote a new story there, we are doing another podcast following it live this time, following the wake of We've Got Ward.
Yeah.
It's a story that doesn't actually require you to have read Pact or anything, and neither does our new show. So you can literally just
jump right
head
in
on over to Pale, the web serial, and start reading, and then listening to Pale Reflections.
No, listen to us first, I reckon. We'll tell you what to watch out for.
We'll tell you what to think, and then you can read it.
Yeah, we'll tell you how to think, and then you think that, okay? That's how it works.
And the Power Reflections feed has a bunch of other stuff going on it as well. Pilot season's there.
Hell yeah.
We're going to be doing an RPG, which may or may not relate to Annihilation a bit, and I don't think Ruben made the connection that I was going for there until right now. But
yeah, there you go.
That's a fun connection.
That's fun.
Yeah. So check out that feed.
Yeah, and of course, we are a proud member of the Duff Media Network. There are a number of great shows on the Duff Media Network that aren't just our shows, so you should check them all out and support the network by going to Patreon, patreon.com/Duff Media to be specific.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess that's that's it. If you want links to all those things, you can check out our website, mediamdpodcast.com, or the Duff Media website, duffmedia.com. That has all the links to stuff that we just mentioned, leaving comments, the Patreon, all that stuff, as well as all the previous clues for the Media M.D ARG, where you can help us figure out just who is Dr. M.D. and why is his biologist so malicious. Elliot, why don't you tell the listeners this fortnight's clue?
Sweat stain.
Sweat stain. And we'll see you next fortnight.